I had a little script thing to read. So tonight our panelists are Ellen, Jason, and Josiah, and these are three individuals who have had a very different journey in their pursuit of God and His mission. But yet, despite their differences, they have managed to come together recently in pursuit of God's mission, and they created a trust. Which has completely slipped my mind right now. It is called the Asian Community Transformation Trust. And so we're not gonna, it's not about the trust tonight, but it is a really cool example of how God brings people together and how mission looks like. So without further ado, I welcome them on stage. How about we give them a hand and let's get started. The audience can get to know you as we go to questions. Cool. So the first question is, as a church, we've recently discussed how God has given us the mission of living out what He created us to be in Christ. What motivates you to pursue this mission instead of any other mission? That's a really deep question. Yeah. I'm just throwing you guys in the deep.
You don't have to, but you can.
So why this mission?
Okay, I'm going to start. I took some notes because they were actually really awesome questions. I was like, oh yeah, so I'm going to refer to them sometimes when my phone is on my knee. Probably Alan's doing something similar. Jason didn't take notes. He's like, oh shit, I should have taken notes. Yeah. No, the first thing that came to my mind on that question, the question is, what motivates you to pursue the mission of God rather than any other mission? The first thing that came to my mind, and something that has come back many times, is, well, what's the point in following anything else, really, to be honest? If you actually think about what's meaningful in life, why do anything else? And how much time do we have? Because I could take it a step further.
Yeah, go.
Okay, alright. I'll try not to. But there's been times and seasons in my life where I've actually had to refine my own motivation. Because sometimes we think, yeah, we're pursuing God, but actually things like our own ambition are kind of getting in the way and stuff like that. And so there's how many things are there? Three things that I found have been really helpful for me to check my own motivation. To see whether it is that or not. The first thing is prayer. As a teenager, I prayed quite a bit to pursue a life worth living, and then it keeps me grounded, and because it's so easy to get distracted in life, and I find that prayer always brings you back to what is actually important. So getting into this daily rhythm has been a super helpful thing. Not when you've got kids, it's way harder to keep daily rhythms, but the second thing, other than prayer, is failures. I think failures have really helped me it brings up all of the hidden selfish motivations. Often, success looks good for me, right? And those kinds of things. So failures in my life have actually helped for me to refine the purpose of what God has for me. And the last thing is trying new things. Because when you try something new, all the insecurities come up, and it's a forced way of having to adjust your own attitudes, your own mindset, and ask yourself a question: why am I really doing this? When you're asking that, why am I really doing this question, you can help to refine, to come back to that point of, I really want to live a mission for God. Why do anything else? Nothing else, everything else is going to pass away.
Right.
prayer, failure, and trying new things are three ways that I've found has helped me find that in me.
If we add to that, you
I think I'll just use what Josiah said with prayer, with failure, and trying new things. And also, I think for me, it's what motivates me with knowing myself through those processes is, I think as I come to know myself, I realize I get very excited when I get to do things new that hasn't been done. And I think something I think over the years, the decade of ministry, I think I start to recognize that my spirit rejoices when I can do that. And that motivates me a lot. And that's kind of, when I use that lens to look back, I see, with the youth ministry in Unite, one of the first expression of English youth ministry in an immigrant church in New Zealand. And that really excites me, and that unknown, and that I have to trust God. I think those kind of space always excites me, like creating new spaces that hasn't been, for something more to come out of it. And I think it's just over the last decades, it's just few instances that make me feel like this is where I trust God the most, I rely on God the most, and I'm also most excited about when I'm in that space. So now within the trust, I think that's everything is so new. Like everyone we get to meet and talk to, like everything is possible. Like everything is a new opportunity that we haven't seen in New Zealand. So that really excites me. And just then I have to then trust God and discern like where is it the next step, and how do you want to do it? That kind of keep trusting God, and that motivates me a lot. Creating new spaces with God. Yeah.
I was thinking about the question again, and the question is, what motivates me to pursue this mission instead of any other mission? And I kind of want to just give a bit of background, I guess, to how we've come together, and also what motivates me personally to kind of get on this journey with these guys. So, as you can see, I'm an Asian guy. So I came to New Zealand when I was 13. Sorry, Josiah. You're a minority here, Josiah. So my family immigrated to New Zealand when I was 13, which is actually quite late. I don't know, has anybody here come to New Zealand after 13? Oh yeah, there's some. Oh, I don't feel so alone. So coming here at 13 is a bit of a tricky age, because you're a bit too old to be a real Kiwi, but you're too young to be like mature enough to like just come and deal with a different environment. So I had a pretty tough time, like growing up, doing part of my growing up here in New Zealand. I remember going into high school and just thinking, what is this place? What's going on? Why do we not stay in the same classroom? Why do we move around? What is happening? Where am I supposed to go? Like, what are the teachers saying? They all had a weird accent, so I couldn't understand the thing they were saying. So it was tough. And as I grew, so throughout high school and uni, I kind of felt like I was a, maybe not even second-class citizen, like third-class citizen. Because it feels like white people and Māori in New Zealand are, that's how it feels anyway. I don't know if it's politically correct, but
they're the Kiwis.
That's how it feels. They're the Kiwis. They're the people that belong here, and I'm like a foreigner. Like I look different. I have an accent. I don't understand everything that's going on. So I learned to just nod and smile. You know? Yeah, some of you know what I'm talking about. That nod and smile. But you actually have no idea what's going on. Yeah. So I kind of had a taste of what it was like to be an Asian living in New Zealand as a third-class citizen, foreigner. So probably in the last 10 years, as I started working and as I finished my professional training and I started working in the mental health world, I started to realize that hey, actually I have something to offer. And then later on, I started to realize that actually the things that I struggle with, the things that may be different, actually they have become a unique thing for me. Like I have something unique to offer that maybe people who are born here don't. So I think I started to see things with a different lens. And so coming back to the question, what motivates me to get on this journey and to do this? I think because I've been through this journey. I would love just to see other Asian people, young Asians, you know, living in this country, to also come to the realization that, you know, maybe your skin color, maybe your culture makes you feel a little bit inferior to the mainstream people, the mainstream culture, but actually one day it's going to become like a strength. It's going to become like a superpower. I remember recently seeing this post on Facebook. It says something about don't laugh at people who have an accent, because they are always fluent in another language, which I really love. Yeah. So that's me.
Thanks, guys. Cool. So it sounds like why the mission is God's mission is ultimately because you believe it to be true, and it's something that isn't just temporary. It's based in God, and then what that looks like for you guys right now is partly through that trust that you've made, and Jason, you shared about what that looks like, and for the Asian community in particular. Does that sound about right? Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Great. Yeah, and I like that you introduce yourself as well, because I just realized that, you know, in preparing the questions, I didn't think like how to introduce the panelists, but feel free to do that as you answer the questions. Thanks, guys. So, question 2 is, how do we know if we are on the right or wrong path?
I will introduce more of myself on the next question because I felt like it fit with the question. But as you can see, I'm not Asian. But I feel Asian sometimes. Is that right? Yeah. No, that is so true. Everything he said. Anyway, how do we know if we are on the right or wrong path? Wow, what an awesome question, because it's something we all wonder at times, right? From my experience, my simple answer would be, oh, you don't know if you're on perfectly 100. You never know 100% if you're on the right path or not. But let's, I'll go explain it a bit more. I think we often ask that question as if it's the most important question, but I don't think that's the most important question we have to ask ourselves. It's not the most fundamental. I think God is less interested about what specific path we are taking. Rather, He's more interested in who we are on that path with, i.e. Him. Are we walking with Him, or are we just doing stuff for Him? It's quite a unique difference there. And for me in my life, I feel like I've been through that question, and when you come up against things that are quite challenging, what God's really interested in is walk with me. And if you're walking with me, if you can get that part right, I find the next path, it's a little bit easier to answer the second question as to what path should I be walking down, what direction should I be taking. So that's my first, from my own experience. But with that in mind, it's still a really important question, because God has created us to be successful, to have a fruitful life, to tackle things and focus on specific issues, and He's called each one of us to specific things, right? So how do we know where to go with that? Well, there's so many books you could read about it, but yeah. 2 of my tips on helping to define that. The first is success is not a defining factor for knowing whether you're on the right path or not. Sometimes something really successful, we kind of, like I've done that with my own life, and that's been a mistake I've made. I'll explain what it was in the next question, but when I was quite successful in a ministry, it looked really good, and it was part of God's plan but it's quite easy to let that success determine what steps I need to take next rather than listen to what God is saying. And that can be quite a dangerous place. So it comes back to that thing. Are you walking with God? Or I, for a season, was more focused on doing all these wonderful, successful things. And I think he's more saying, hey, no, make sure you're always walking with me before you do stuff for me. Yeah.
Same flow, same pattern. I totally agree. I wrote down we might not know 100%. And I think sometimes we're too stuck on knowing 100% certainty that this is it. And then we take a step. I don't think it ever gets there.
Yeah.
And yeah, where's the faith in that? For me, the thing is, we can still discern to our best of our abilities. I think it's responsible to discern, but also it is far more important to trust God. I think one thing I often tell myself and tell others is, like, the God you believe in, is he big enough to correct what you thought was wrong and guide you towards what is right? We can think that we're so amazingly powerful that if I make a wrong step, it's incorrectable, and that's kind of how we limit ourselves. But we're actually limiting God, thinking that you can't deal with my mistakes, like it's too great for you. And so for me, I'm definitely jumping on Josiah's bandwagon. It's about who you're with and whether you're faithful to those steps. And often, for me personally, I don't know until in hindsight as well. I think God uses a lot of confirmations to encourage when the decision is made, and God gives a lot of clues for you to wait and listen and discern and just trust. But then He often confirms as well. Like even just lately, a couple of weeks ago, I was, approached about this opportunity to go to US and UK, and just for this trip. And it sounds very exciting. But when I felt like, I do want to go. And when I pray and ask God more, I realized how everything worked out in terms of it is a season that I feel like God says, I want to see what, like God is kind of putting me into ministries with other churches. And I've never really done that a lot. I've always been kind of like a one church guy. And I was just like, God, like if you're doing this, help me to learn what that is. And when this came about, and it's like, we have like 14 days of ministry time, and there's like 13 different churches. I'm just like, okay, this sounds kind of like what you're doing, but like on steroids, but it still aligns with what you're doing in my season. So that's kind of like the discerning process I have, like, God, what are you, is it in alignment with what you've been showing me? And then the timing was perfect, because Ishi and the kids would just have gone back to Malaysia to visit her family. So I don't feel like I'm leaving her on her own in New Zealand. If that was the case, I would say not the right timing, no. So a few things make me feel like this is, the discerning process feels like this is right. And then comes the faith part. It feels right, but can I actually do it? And that's when your faith can be kind of affected. It's like, do I really have the money to go to US and UK? That's a very realistic question, because we finally saved up a bit. But for me, that's like a contingency saving for my reduced role. You guys know, like, since June, I'm 30 hours paid. And just thinking like, so I can like cut into the saving, and then as I transition and God does His work, then there's a safety net there. So I'm just like, am I going to use my safety net for this? And I think it's just God just keeps encouraging me, so you have to go. I was like, okay. So I try to be reasonable and responsible, and I ask how much it's going to cost. It's like 3.2K for the tickets, and plus about 500 spending money. So it's like, okay, like 4,000. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to conservatively say 4,500. Because Asian want to be safe. And I was like, 4,500. Might just be safe and say 5K. Let's just give me a mental padding of 5K. And then the tickets came back. Tickets alone is almost 5K. I'm just like, oh God, what are you doing? But God is good. I think when I was like really struggling, he said just do it, like just trust me. And literally the next day, 2 people came to me and said, "Oh, I heard you're on this trip," and I haven't even asked for support, and they're just like, "Give me a bank account, we're gonna support you." I'm just like, okay. So there's discerning and then there's confirmation that gives you a better understanding, not 100%, but you're more certain that this is the right path, and that's kind of like a little journey like that. Yeah.
It's cool. I don't have anything that's nearly as as miraculous as Alan's, but yeah, I agree with these two. I think we don't always know, and it's not the most important thing to know. I found this verse in Deuteronomy somewhere. It says, the hidden things belong to God, and the revealed things belong to people, so that you may do God's will. I think that's pretty interesting, because sometimes we are so obsessed with getting it right, and with knowing that this is the right path before we take the first step. God's will sometimes is hidden. It's not all revealed to us. And Josiah quite rightly said, if it's all revealed to us, then where is the faith in that? You know, sometimes God puts us in situations that requires us to have some faith, requires us to trust in Him, even though it looks like we might be going in the wrong direction. It feels like we're going in the wrong direction, but God is still in it, and He will eventually right what seems like wrong. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah. But having said that, I do believe it's responsible to discern. So kind of building on what Ellen was saying, you know, in terms of discernment, how do we discern what is God's will, and how do we kind of, what gives us some clues of what might be right, what might be wrong? Well, I guess most of the time we know what's right and wrong, don't we? I think we do. I think we have common sense. And I think God puts common sense in us to help guide us in that way. So it doesn't always have to be so mystical and like you got to go to a crystal ball and rub it in a certain way and chant certain things and then you get some mystical words. It doesn't always have to be so mystical. Just use your common sense that God gave you. When God created you, He put common sense in you, so use it. I think that's a good first step. And then you can look at what's in the Scripture. That's always a safe bet as well, isn't it? There are some things that God clearly says in the Scripture to do. And there are some things that God clearly says in the Scripture not to do. Use that as a guidance. And then I would also suggest using your environment, using your surroundings, using the people around you, the wise people in your life. What do they say? What would they think? You know, kind of make use of your surrounding and your environment to help guide you towards what's right. Yeah, I think we don't always know, but there are certain clues, and I think that's how I would go about kind of navigating in this world. But then we should have the ultimate like sense of security that even if we do make a mistake, God's still He's still in charge. He's still in control. He still has like authority and sovereignty. Like you could stuff up, but He already knows you're going to stuff up anyway. So it's kind of you'll be okay. So have faith in God and use those common sense things to help navigate. I think that's what I would say.
The faith thing, yeah, totally. You can't do things for like faith. God wants us to encourage our faith, and sometimes that means you can't see all the answers. But that someone once told me, and I really like the analogy of, you know, if you keep turning a car's wheels and but you're not moving, the car's not driving, it's not going anywhere. But if you're moving the car, then it can actually go right or left, right? And I kind of feel that sometimes if we're walking with God, if we're doing things that Jason shared on and actively pursuing and desiring to move with Him, and He is able to lead it and direct it left or right. But if you're not moving, if you're just like passively waiting and doing nothing, you're not going anywhere, you know? The car only will turn left or right if it's moving.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, guys. That was really, really helpful. And so remember, if you have any questions from that you want to explore more, feel free to use the QR code. Third question is, how do we know when God is leading us in a new or different direction?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I thought I'd take this chance to share, that's happened a lot of times in our lives. Everything from the last question applies to this one as well, I feel. But in our lives and in my life, it's happened so many times. There's new directions, new seasons. If you get married, it's a new direction, right? You have kids, it's the new season. All that stuff is applicable. But when I was 19, I was in New Zealand, I was an athlete. Semi-sponsored, came third in the Christchurch half marathon here. So I was almost like on that level, and people were calling me and saying, "Hey, can we sponsor you? We want you to create a running race." And it was super exciting to see all this cool stuff coming up in this kind of direction. And I was so busy at the time, and I did something really stupid and went away for a weekend to pray. I prayed about it all and just felt like God was not leading me in that direction, to be honest, and I had to put it all aside. And I felt actually, through many of those other confirmations, that I was to go study the Bible in Hawaii. It sounds weird, I know, it was weird to me too, but that's what I did. Met my wife over there, and it turned out all wonderful. But that was a total, prayer was a major shift in confirmation in my heart.
Can we explore that part a bit more? So what does it actually look like? When you realize that's not what God's calling me to do?
Yeah. Oh man. For me, I was 19, so I was first of all, I was pretty rash and ambitious. So I think God was speaking to me a little bit in my own way of relating to Him at that time. But for me, and even now, prayer has to be a major factor in making any kind of decision that's going to change a new direction in life. And it comes back down to many of the Psalms where it says, or Proverbs about fearing the Lord. I always ask myself that question, am I not going this direction because I am loving something more than God? And so in prayer, all of that comes up again, right? And then you realise, and I realised for the sports stuff, that it was all my own selfishness. Not that running's wrong, it's just I actually already knew that I should be going to Hawaii. I'd already been speaking about it and stuff in the past. I knew it was there, and prayer just really helped to clarify that and give me the confidence to start walking on some of those decisions. That's one example when I was 19. Yeah. I'll just cut it short, but I think it doesn't always have to make sense, a new direction in life. When we were in China, we thought we were going to be there forever. And everything was failing, and everything was, the doors were just shutting in our face, and it forced us into the corner to ask those questions again.
And so this is the part where I forgot to introduce you. You were in China.
Yeah, so this is later on, a few years ago, we were trying to build a ministry in China after we were living in Switzerland, which is another story. So we were in China trying to build a ministry there for counselling, and we were just getting thrown into the corner and nothing was working out. And we, in our minds, had thought we're going to be here for the rest of our lives and we're going to have a great ministry, and we're super ambitious about it. And it may be God's promises, but he, after being pushed in the corner and in that process of prayer again, for the first time in 10 years, because I lived overseas for 10 years, God said, "Hey, why don't you go back to New Zealand? I need you, I've got something for you there." And I was like, "What?" And then started to explore that slowly over a period of time, and a similar kind of experience, but that one was much more it still didn't make sense in my mind. I thought I was going this way, and now I'm going this way. It's quite a hard place to be. Yeah. It doesn't always make sense, but the same principles apply for prayer, walking with God, you take the confidence you need in one of those places to be at peace. Yeah, I'm going to be quiet now.
Otherwise, I think it's just summarizing my points.
What was the question again?
How do we know when God is leading us in a new or different direction?
Oh man, I have to admit, I haven't taken many risks in life. I'm a really risk adverse kind of person. Like I take the path that's already well established and paved in concrete and it's safe. So my life like really pales in comparison to Josiah's. Like when I hear about his life story, I'm like, gee, he's been through a lot. This dude, gotta be nicer to him. So for me, but I suppose I'm sort of going through a bit of a transition at the moment. I won't talk too much about it just right now because I don't really know what's happening yet. But I feel like for me a clue may be when something is like really breaking your heart. That's for me. That's sometimes a calling. That maybe God wants me to do something about that thing that's breaking my heart. So if you feel like day in and day out something's really, really troubling you, really, really bothering you, that sometimes that's a sign that maybe God wants you to, maybe God is calling you into this area to do something. And so to answer the question, for me personally, what would be a sign that maybe God is leading me in a different direction? For me, it'll be it stops breaking my heart anymore. Maybe nothing's changed, maybe not much has changed, but it just doesn't bother me as much anymore. It doesn't burden my heart the same way it used to. For me, that's like a sign that maybe it's time to move to a different zone. It's time to move to a different direction. Yeah, so a little bit of personal. That's how I think.
I think because I wrote down like 4 points, and I think kind of summarizes. So if you're taking note, go to heaven, you can write this down. But this is how I do it. How do we know when God is leading us into new or different directions? I think kind of first thing I wrote down is kind of what Jason said. Look for clues, and the clues could be actually emotion, like huge frustration, huge excitement, heartbreak. And God gives us emotions. Like don't think of your emotions as a bad thing. Like emotions is not like the flesh, right? I mean, emotions has a room for the enemy to distract you and all that, but God created your emotions as well. God's a passionate God, He has emotions. Emotions gives us clue. And so look for clues. Emotion could be one. New things, might be new people, like new relationships, friendships, network, new doors open, new opportunity that comes up. Those can give a clue to perhaps something is happening. And some clues are actually confirmations of past prayers. So something might pop up and you're like, I remember 10 years ago I made a prayer around this, and this is coming up, that needs my attention now. So that's the first point, look for clues. The second is to talk to other people about the clues that you're seeing, so that there's a sounding board, so that there's someone wise to reflect with. And the third one is kind of like the second one. If you found someone wise already, it's just ask a mentor. The second one is sometimes like go to friends or spouse first. But if you have a spiritual mentor or spiritual director, ask them. Let them bounce off. I think for me, taking this step into planning a sabbatical and the transition I've made in my life, one of the biggest help was Donald, was my spiritual director. And he really helped me to phrase things in a different perspective, to think and pray again about different things. So look for clues, share with others, ask a mentor. And the fourth one is what Josiah says, just keep it in your prayers and wait. All right, keep it in your prayers and wait. Don't force it too much. Sometimes our ambition will cause us to force certain doors to open, but God often opens the right doors at the right time. So you kind of feel like you're just being it's just a flow that there's a grace that flows into it as well, even though it's already like opened. But maybe you're not there, but at a certain point you feel like it's just the courage just flows you into it. So don't force it. If you feel like you're forced it by your strength, that could be a signal as well. So look for clues, share with others, ask a mentor, and keep it in your prayer and wait. Yeah.
I think Ellen, I really like what Ellen said about kind of being patient and waiting and not forcing the doors open. And I think the same goes the other way. Sometimes the door's already been opened and the current is guiding you through. But I think most commonly it's out of fear. We put our hands up against the door, we're like, no, I'm not going through, you know? And when you think about why you're resistant to this next step, and you really take the time to think about it and talk about it with people, maybe it's out of fear, and you don't even know what you're afraid of. Maybe it's insecurity. Who knows? So I think we need to be cautious both ways. I think. Yeah.
Thank you. What should we do when it seems like we are not bearing any fruit despite our effort and desire to pursue God's mission?
I think the first point here is sometimes life just sucks. Right? Sometimes, I do think we sometimes just need to grit our teeth. The fruit or the success can't be a defining factor of the measurement of our obedience to God or not. I think this conversation always reminds me of Jeremiah in the Bible. His life was 50 years of fruitlessness. You know, he was telling people to do this and they just always did the opposite thing, and then the whole city was destroyed and his life was so depressing. But he faithfully obeyed God the whole way, which is just incredible. So we can't, first of all, we can't use success to measure our obedience to God. And the second thing is just hold on, never mind. Lost my train of thought. What should we do when it seems like we're not bearing any fruit? I'd go back to God. I've been in places where I've been producing lots of fruit, and when we were in Switzerland, we ran a Chinese ministry there, and we had hundreds of Chinese we were working with, and many of the big leaders of the Chinese churches who oversee millions we would meet, or their children we would meet. It was just so exciting, and I was young and we were so fruitful, and seeing huge amounts of money come in to support it. It was really exciting. And then we moved to China and thought we were going to grow it, and then it just went, and nothing. And so I've been through a lot of fruitful times and fruitless times, and both of them were the fruitless time was way harder, obviously, but it was upon the word of the Lord in either circumstance. And I'd say that you just have to come back to that to remind yourself if you're in that kind of place. Sometimes it's that you get the affirmation to go, even that I'm not seeing fruit, I do feel that God is saying continue with this, keep going, like Jeremiah. But you may come back to that place, that discipline of practicing to hear from the Lord again, and it may be that you come to the conclusion that it's a closed door now. I'm supposed to go in a new direction. I don't think we can make that decision based on just seeing our circumstances. Sometimes it's good to take a third step out, go on a camp or go away for a weekend or something to just get out of the situation and pray and talk to people and do all of those other things we've already said.
Yeah, I think it takes courage to step in. It also takes courage to stay. So don't make your own decisions going back to God. So what should you do? Because it does happen, and more often than not, especially growing up in the world environment we do, following God doesn't always look fruitful in that kind of a lens and perspective. So instead of judging it by the lens that we might have taken from the world in terms of that success and that outcome, what does the lens from God look like? And I think if we read through the Bible faithfully, it is super, super clear. God doesn't call people for fruit. God calls people for their faithfulness. Alright? It's just do what I said to do faithfully. And I think that's very powerful. So I think at those times, the way we can assess is just try to unpack that experience of what you're feeling and seeing. With people, again, mentor, spiritual director, friends, your pastor or something, unpack it so that you can see really the lens. Have I been faithful? Am I being obedient? And if there's areas that you're not, own it up, let people speak into your life with those constructive feedback and make adjustments. But if you feel, if at the end of the day you've done your evaluation, you feel like I'm a sinner, I'm not perfect, but I feel I've tried my best to be faithful and obedient. Then that's the second thing I might do is actually then you probably just need to persevere and be patient. Unless God calls you in a new season, just persevere and be patient. The fruit comes in His time. How we bear fruit, the Bible gives the imagery of being connected to the source, and that's all we're doing. We can't bear fruit. The source bears fruit, and maybe just not in the season. Like you can't go through like winter season and look at your. It's a bad analogy because I don't know plants. So look at whatever tree that won't bear fruit in winter and be like cherry and be like bear fruit. Like it's not gonna work. Like at the right time, it's gonna happen. So whether you're connected to the source is more important. So persevere and be patient. And then it's actually another way of looking at it is, God. We look at a church and we've talked about it. As a church, we all have different functions and roles. As a global church, we also have different functions and roles. So when Paul wrote his letter, I forgot which book, he says, Apollos sowed the seed and he watered, and it's God who calls it to grow. So he's clear that they all have a different role in the ministry. And what if you're always breaking dry ground so that someone can sow, so that someone can nurture, and that someone who comes along and has no idea what's going on, just reap all the harvest. But if that is God's timing and your purpose and your role in His kingdom, the best thing you can do is to be faithful. And I say that with like a little with me, because I think God's role for me is breaking dry grounds. And that is tiring, that is tough, and it is And every time I kind of hear someone pray something different, and one of the person that keeps praying for me is actually Amy, my sister-in-law. And she's just like, I just see, and it's always like hard work, like dry ground. It's just like terrible. Just like, where's the green pasture? And then it's just like, maybe it's just not for you. It's just like, maybe it's just not for me. But I actually do love the person of breaking ground. I think I'm burning up to it even more now. And maybe that's just it. Maybe in my time, I just really see the fruit that people might say it that way, but I might see the fruit of faithfulness and breaking grounds. And everyone is different. Yeah.
I've got nothing to add.
Thanks, guys. Last question. How can we pursue God's mission in environments like our schools or workplaces where it is challenging and not immediately relevant to others?
For me, it's about not being in a hurry. Like, don't be in too much of a hurry to ram the gospel down people's throats, because it's annoying and it doesn't work. I think our action speaks louder than words. You don't want to be that person that's always talking about something that you're very passionate about. But when people look at how you are and people look at how you treat your classmates or your workmates, they go, oh, I don't want to be like you. So whatever you preach, I'm probably going to go in the opposite direction. Some parents make that mistake. Some Christian parents make this mistake with their children. They preach very passionately to their children, but they act in a way that really annoys their children. And so it creates this weird dynamic where the kids look at their parents and go, I know this is what you believe, but I just, deep in my heart, I just don't want to go there. I don't want to be you. I don't want to be like you because I don't like you. Sorry, future parents. It happens. So, as a parent, I think my primary mission is to help my kids know that I love them and have them like me. I suppose it's part of the job. So that one day when it comes time for them to make a decision, so that one day when they're thinking about their faith, they kind of want what I have. They kind of want to follow what I follow. And I think it's the same way with our surroundings, whether it's schoolmates or workmates. Preach the gospel without action first, and then when the time is right, be ready to speak. So you wanna practice. You wanna know how to share the gospel with people. If the time ever comes, if the opportunity comes up, you wanna be ready. Like you wanna be like a loaded gun. You wanna be ready to deliver it in a succinct, effective way. But don't be in too much of a hurry to do it. You've got to wait for God's timing as well. Maybe you're never meant to be the one to share. Maybe you're just breaking dry grounds, so that one day someone else can reap. But that's all good. It's all good. I think that's how I look at it. Yeah.
The only thing I would add is previous encounter messages on record. Just watch the last time I spoke here. Just talk about living in exile and the dynamics and the challenges. Totally with Jason. But then it became quite challenging in our society where it feels like sometimes our values are polar opposite to the values of the society we live in. And that can be really hard to navigate. And so I preached a sermon on that because I can't answer that in 1 minute, but it's a really difficult place to navigate. I can't even remember the answers to that question right now, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very similar. I totally agree with what Jason said. And when I think of this question, I just kind of have another question. Like, I guess I want to ask all of us, like, do we immediately kind of assume a message about God's mission or a message about God or the gospel is irrelevant? Because I think if I look at Jesus, like, his message was never irrelevant. It might be a bit like, I never thought of it that way, but it was never irrelevant. Like, if we talk about relevant, so I read this somewhere, like, Jesus kind of preached to his environment as not just the people, like, he gave example probably like sowing seeds. He just saw someone sowing seeds, just like, hey, let me give an analogy of sowing seeds, because it's just a very daily thing with his stories. Like, all his stories are very relevant, but there's something in it that transcends the situation. So I guess, when we think about, the question is, how can we pursue God's mission in environments like our school or workplace where it is challenging, not immediately relevant to others? Maybe we assume too much that it's going to be irrelevant. What if it's actually meant to be relevant? It's just that we're stuck in thinking that it has to be kind of irrelevant. I don't know whether this makes sense, but sometimes I feel like the method we take from the starting point might be a bit off already, because we're not thinking of how to make the method relevant, and because we think if we change the method, we're changing the message, but the message and the method is two different things.
Right.
Jesus has the same consistent message that was really odd and weird, and he got crucified for the message, but his method was relevant. And I think it's just how we see the difference, and not always trying to make it irrelevant and stop us when we don't need to stop ourselves.
Cool. Yeah, I think what you were saying, Jason, was that it's not just ramming the gospel down their throat. So it's the method that might look different, but the gospel is always relevant. But how we share it to people around us can look different. And I think we were talking about it in our life group the other week, where someone was wondering. I'm going to join the panelists now. And someone was wondering, like, in my workplace, like, it seems like I'm just hustling, and then I finish the week, and then I haven't had much time with God. And the thought came to me, which was, well, what if we actually are constantly focusing on God, even in our workplace, And the person realized that actually, if I did that, my day would have looked different, because I would have noticed, oh, I could have a conversation with that colleague, and I could have done that, because suddenly the attention is shifted. So thought to just add that.
That's good.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. That was all the questions, and I've checked online. It doesn't look like we have any Q&A. Oh, we do have one now. It seems. We got time to go for it? Just one question? Oh, I just refreshed and it's gone. Can anyone see it? Because the Wi-Fi is like real shoddy here. Anyone see it?
Or anyone want to just
Yeah, read it out.
raise one?
Oh, I got it here.
Oh.
The question was, what was the best time in your life spiritually? And do you know why it was good? What was the best time in your life spiritually? And do you know why it was good?
So I've got two. One was when I was in Hawaii, and another time I thought a weird time ended up going there. Well, it was a high, everything was high, everything was amazing, studying the Bible, fell in love, just all those things. God was really doing amazing things. So that was a really spiritual high. And we had those times, and it was just wonderful. I'm going to say another spiritual high was when there was one season where it was really, really low and dark, and that has been over the past 2 years ago. I just worked myself to the ground, fell into a pit of depression, and it was really, really tough. And so tough, I felt lost. I didn't feel God was around me at all. But I do feel that spiritually, now looking at it, it's very formative for my life. And it has really switched my priorities and my outlook on how I approach others, approach God, and approaching life. I feel I have so much more empathy towards others, to myself, to my children, and my relationship with God is very new because of that. And so it was not a high, it was like so exciting, but it was very formative for my life. Yeah.
I think for me, I can think of two periods of my life. One was when I was in uni, and I still had a really good buddy, Jackson. Some of you might know him. He's really tall, really lanky, Asian boy. Yeah. So he was the one that brought me into this habit of praying. And so back then we would pray. My wife, Jackson, myself, a couple of other really kind of close people we would pray together every week. And I remember that there was no pressure to do it. There was no one asked us to do it. We just wanted to do it, and we would just do it because we wanted to, and we were really thirsty for just to be closer with God. And we would do that. And I remember that time. It was a real good time. And I was young, and we were also just really simple-minded. Like our mind was just really kind of simple. We just wanted to experience more of God. So I remember that was a really good time. I think that probably for me was a spiritual high. Another time probably is right now. I think for me right now is a really kind of challenging but also exciting time. I just feel like I'm being carried by this current alongside these guys, trying to do things for the community, not just do things within a church, but it's literally bringing the gospel and bringing God's grace to people. I feel like that's what we're doing right now with the trust. And for me, that's super exciting because I never ever thought that church could be like this, that faith could act in this way. So for me, this is a huge, it's very challenging, and it's definitely encouraging me to walk closer with God. Because I feel like a lot of with the trust, I feel like a lot of responsibility has been placed on us. God has opened doors to some resources coming in, but also we are having to be good stewards to this resource and make good decisions and try to really act in the interest of the community. So those responsibilities feel heavy, yes, but also really exciting and really challenging. So, yeah, glad to say that I'm in a high right now.
I like how everyone changed. So the question is about when was it the high? Why was that? And I love the question by how you guys answer it, because you're not really answering a spiritual high, you're answering about spiritual intimacy. And I think often we look at it as a high and low thing, and we always have a different idea what high feels like. High feels like exciting, happening, that's a high, and low is a so every is like a low. But if you look at it in terms of intimacy, what Josiah said, that lower point was intimate, and that was a spiritual high. So I really love the way you guys answer. I just want to like rephrase it and stick with you. Like, stop thinking of your spirituality with a high and low, but assist it with like intimacy. That's one. For me, yeah, I think I'll quickly jump on them, what they basically all say. So for me, the three immediate one. One is leaving the engineering field into youth ministry, youth work, because I really needed God. I had this encounter with Him, and I just love that encountering. I just try to do what I know to stay close with Him, pray, reading the Word, studying, not just reading, studying the Word. And there's like a good 3 months to half a year, that's something I did a lot, and I was super close with God. It really anchored the foundation for ministry life. And the next one is around that 2000, really since Encounter started in 2015, like the family space that we're in, and people from Encounter will know, and then leading into one of the young girls that we've come to know through the youth group, taking her own life. And then really to another guy taking his own life as well. I think those were a very dark time for me, and especially the early on days. So that's like 15 to 17, or close to 18, that kind of 2015 to 18. So that was when I really needed God. I think that was so formative for me, that God taught me how to slow, and how to listen, how to care, and I think that was just so formative. But it was like the lowest time I've ever experienced in my life. I wouldn't want to talk to anyone, I hide a lot of things, and anyway. But it was intimate. I was intimate with God. And the next one is like Jason said right now. Like, I think God has formed me, and He's releasing me now for a brief period. I don't know how long this would be, the way He's dealing with my life. But I'm very excited, and I needed Him ever more at any time I have in my life as well. Yeah, so the intimacy. Yeah.
And on that note, and to finish, it's the first time we've had the three of you here. So one of the last question on here is, what does the trust do? So maybe you can just share that, and then we'll close.
Yeah, I'll just, if you guys want to share, you can. That's a very good question. Okay, so one person actually said to us, as a trust, like, the world is your oyster right now. Anything can go with this trust. Because where we're at right now with this trust is there's really not really any other charity or trust that is operating the way we are operating and trying to do what we're doing in terms of helping New Zealand engage with Asians within their services, being that space, being that voice, and elevating well-being from mental health, from family, from sports, and quite a holistic way that we're looking at. So, but that's very vague. But what we are doing right now is we're really discerning whatever God shows up that connects to either helping the Asian culture being known and understood by the existing services, or integrating the Asian communities into their local communities in New Zealand, or education and training around mental health in these aspects of things. So that's kind of our purpose, like that's our anchoring things. But the way we have been operating is just let God really take in the floor. We had a supervision group that Jason leads, it's an amazing group. And in that group there's mental health coaches, but now like professional service providers are also in their space. We have people from youth youth line there, we have people from Plunkett there, and we're kind of seeing how we can use the space to continue to motivate and encourage Asians in these professional services, give them the tools, give them the support, and keep showing them the mission that's out there and support them for those missions that they're in. And that's something God really built up in an interesting way. We're actually, it's very fresh, so fresh off the press, Mana Ake, we've met with them and one of their teams, and they actually want us to go, and so Mana Ake is like a social worker kind of umbrella within the New Zealand systems. I don't get the system, so Sion will tell you everything about Mana Ake. So if you have questions for Mana Ake, Sion is in that field. But they invited us to go speak into their Mana Ake kind of hub thing, and also invited us to speak at the next, not the next, but one of the cluster meetings with the teachers, because the teachers is kind of the first gate for the Asian families to reach the services. The teacher refer and assist in all that first. So they want us right there at the connection point with the Asian families and provide trainings at that space as workshop as well. So that's kind of something God led, and we just kind of like, all right, if you're there, we're just gonna jump there and everything else can wait. But otherwise, there's a lot of little things brewing. So like Josiah's seeing a need with Asian families, and so he wants to start an Asian family forum next year that can help connect things through Mana Ake workers and things through Plunkett as well, just Asian families that need support. But I guess there's a lot of things in the community, but really at the heart, we want to see churches utilizing, exploiting this platform that we have created in the community so that we can be Christ-like in the community. All right, so what we have come to see, I don't think I share it this way, but you guys probably would agree. Immigrant churches are here, like immigrants, mainly for survival. So it is very understandable immigrant churches will first look within the walls of the church, because we need to establish ourselves, feel secure enough before we feel like we can branch out and help others. So we tend to help our own first. And that's why resources are often hard within a church space to explore what's out there in the community. And it's very hard, so in my ministry I often try to create spaces between churches and communities, and it takes a lot of time, effort, resources. It is a different place. So we want to create those spaces for churches and say, just come. The community is there, you know Christ. If you don't know how to be Christ-like, this is the best way to learn to be Christ-like, how to live out the gospel, not just preach the gospel. And let's just see what God can do in this space. Don't wait and say, come to our church. Let us just really be the God and show Christ into the world. So we also want to do that. So we want to create a win-win. So the community wins because their needs are being served by the church. The church wins because they can be Christ in the community. And the trust wins because we get to do what we set out to do. So that's kind of the situation we're trying to create as well. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Yeah.
Well, I've invited a couple of mental health coaches that have been through the program and are regularly attending our monthly supervision gatherings. So if you guys want to stand up and say hello. Coaches. Hello. Yeah, round of applause for these guys. Yeah, so I wanted to invite them because they're like kind of the starting, like the pioneers of what we're doing as a trust, in terms of training up Asian people to have more of an idea around mental health. The journey is still ongoing, and we're still adding new people to the supervision group, including some health professionals, which is really cool. Hopefully there will be a counselor join us next time too. So it will really add value to the group. For now, we're seeing a bunch of Asians get together in one room once a month, and just seeing each other is encouraging. Meeting other Asians who have a heart for mental health, for well-being is exciting. And really excited about family stuff that's going to happen through schools and also through the forum. Yeah, so exciting times.
There's so much to say.
Thank you guys for sharing your hearts with us tonight. It was really insightful for me, and I hope it was for you too. Can we give them a hand?
Alright, let's bow our head and let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for encountering the space to do things different, in order to capture your heart and your message through a different format that's not just a one direction preaching. And Lord, I just thank you for the panelists today. I thank you for Jason and Josiah, just the life that they have faithfully lived and now faithfully following you wherever you're taking them. And I just thank you that this is such a diverse expression of what can happen as we follow God. And Lord, I just pray, Holy Spirit, that you just imprint in our hearts that God uses us. God uses you, your unique you, and you have something to play in His kingdom and in His mission that only you can do. And it will look different to everyone else's because you're different to everyone else as well. So Lord, I pray for a courage to pray for freshness in their lives, that they will start owning up their uniqueness and see your unique fingerprints in their lives to step into as well. Whether it's a person around them, whether it is a group of people that they see at their work, or whatever it is, Lord, I pray that you give them this new and fresh confidence that as they remain intimate with you, you will take them to places, to people, to activities and experiences that is beyond their wildest dreams. So Lord, I just pray that our Christian living, our Christ following is exciting as it should be, because you've always intended it to be exciting as we abide in the Spirit. So Lord, I just thank you for today. I just thank you for everyone here. And I just pray a blessing as we continue to journey and process and reflect the mission that you're forming in us. And may we be also formed for your mission. So now may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, the fellowship and power of the Holy Spirit be with each and every one of us from now on and forevermore. Alright, thanks guys. Next week we're still here and we have a missionary couple from OMF that they're going to be speaking to us as well. So I'll see you guys next week. And thank you for being a champ and staying through a bit later today, but hopefully this is of value to you, and always feel free to reach out to us. We're very accessible online and the other things. So I'll see you guys next time. Maybe this
And
will
they need to know and then like
So what would it mean to send you money to bed?
no, they would sponsor the they would sponsor me to run and to create this new running race. So like thousands of years to set it up because they just love the idea. And then super excited.
now we've got ACT teacher, maybe
Waiting to sign up to it.
yeah.
She needs to sign up to start.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Now she's waiting for it to sign up as an individual.
Oh, okay.
So she's like, she keeps asking me.
Yeah, we don't know how big a group we will end up having. Or are we talking about one, like two weeks or 1 month that we
这是你的小宝宝吗？对呀，宝宝宝宝宝 OMG 哦。他是男生吗？还好，我
Yeah.
对呀。 天哪！
donations and all that. It's easy to set up. We'll give a little bit, just put it that way. And then
时间过好快哦。对呀，现在是很快。
I want to see.
Just go around saying I'm better than New Zealand.
I got to ask my physio.